Sales of Good Act 1930. The Sales of Good Act 1930 deals with the law relating to the sales of goods in 1930. This is the act mainly based on the English Sales of Good Act 1893. Before the Sales of Good Act 1990, all of the provisions related to the sales of goods was covered under the chapter of 7 of the Indian Contract Act 1870. A strong need was felt that the independent sale of product has, and consequently a new act called Sale of Product 1930 was passed. The act came into the force from 1st July to 1930 and extended to the whole of the India. Introduction. Sales of goods is one of the specific forms of contract organized and regulated by the law in India. Sales is typically bargaining between the buyers and the seller. The sales of goods 1930 allows the party to modify the provisions of the law by express stipulations. However, in some cases, the freedom is heavily restricted. Sales of goods 1930 in an act to define and amend the law relating to the sales of goods. Scope of the act. The provision of the act are applicable to the contract related to the sales of goods, which means movable property. The act is not applicable for the sale of immovable property like land, fields, shops, or house, etc. For immovable property, Transfer of Property Act 1882 is applicable. Sales of Good Act 1930 deals only with movable property. Generally, the provision of the Indian Contract Act is generally applied to the contract of sales of good act as far as are not inconsistent with the express provisions of the Sales of Good Act. The expression used but not defined in the Sales of Good Act 1930 and defined in the Indian Contract Act 1830 to have the meaning assigned to them in the Act. The custom and uses would binding of both the parties if these are reasonable or known to the parties at the time of entering into the contract. Sales of good act 1930. Buyer and the seller. Buyer and seller. Buyer means a person who buys or agrees to buy the goods. Buy the goods. Seller means a person who sell or agrees to sell the goods. The term buyer and the seller complementary and represent the two parties to a contract of the sales of goods. Both the terms and however used in the sense of in a wider sense, there are the common meaning. Not only the person who buys, but also one agrees to buy in a is a buyer. Similarly, a seller means not only a person who sells, but also a person who agrees to sell. Goods and other related terms. Goods means every kind of movable property other than actionable claims and money, and includes stocks and shares, growing crops, and to the things attached to the common growing crops and things attached to the foreign part of the land, which means agrees to be served separated from the land before the sales of under the sales of contract of sale. Section 27 section 27 होता है जिसमें मतलब कोई भी फॉर्मल पार्ट ऑफ लैंड भी हो सकता है, ग्रोइंग क्रॉप, स्टॉक, शेयर्स एक्सेट्रा कुछ भी हो सकता है. Actionable claims are the claims which can be enforced only by actions or suits. A debt is a movable property or given loan or goods. Even the fixed deposit receipts FDR are considered as goods under Section 176 of the Indian Contract Act reads with the Section 27 of the Sales of Good Act. Goods include both tangible and intangible goods like copyright, patent, trademark, etc., stock and share, gas steams, water, electricity, and degree of the good are also considered to be goods. Classification. Goods means every kind of movable property, actionable claims, money in considerations, and also includes stock, shares, growing crops, and things attached to the forming part of the land which agreed to be served. Goods, existing goods, future goods, contingent goods, specific good, ascertained good, unascertained good. Existing goods are such goods which are existent at the existence at the time of the contract of sale, that is, those who own or purchased or acquired by the sellers at the time of the contract of sale. Existing goods may be following terms. Specific goods means identified and agreed upon at the time of the contract of sale is made. Any specific and existing goods क्या होता है जो at the time of the contract exist करता है. Such existing goods are such goods which are existence at the time of the contract of sale, that is those who owned or possessed or acquired by the seller at the time of the contract of sale. Specific goods and means goods identified or agreed upon at the time of the contract of sale is made. Section 240. Ascertained goods are those goods which are identified in accordance with the agreement after the contract of sale is made. This term is not defined in the act but judicially interpreted in the actual practice. Certain goods are those goods which are identified in the accordance with the agreement after the contract of sale is made. The term is not defined in the act but has been judicially interpreted in the actual practice. The term ascertained goods is used in the same sense as specific goods. When out of the lot or out of large quantity of the unascertained goods, the number of the quantity contracted for its identified such identified goods are called ascertained goods. जो ascertained होते हैं मतलब पता होता है कि कौन से गुड्स हमें चाहिए कौन से गुड्स नहीं चाहिए उसे कहते हैं ascertained goods. Unascertained goods are those goods which are not specifically identified or ascertained with the time of the using the contract. They are indicated or defined only by description or sample. मतलब unascertained है उन्हें बस description और sample से ascertained ऐसा बताया गया उसने मतलब कभी देखा नहीं है. एक स्पेशल गिव पैकेट ऑफ सॉल्ट मतलब उसने कहा कि पैकेट ऑफ सॉल्ट उसने ये नहीं कहा कौन सा पैकेट ऑफ सॉल्ट देगा. पैकेट ऑफ सॉल्ट में जो लॉट है उसमें से कोई सा भी निकाल के दे सकता है वो. ठीक है तो ये हो गया unascertained goods. They are indicated or defined by only description and sample. Sample या description से identify किया जाएगा उससे. Future goods means goods to be manufactured, produced or acquired by the seller after making the contract of sale. Future goods means goods to be manufactured, produced or acquired by the seller after making of the contract of sale. मतलब contract of sale बनने के बाद जब उसको acquire करेगा ना seller तब. यार तेरी मेरी पिक चली गई. अरे कुछ ऐसा कमाल आशाएं में दिल की मंजिलों में दिल की अब रुकना नहीं आसान. A contract for the sale of future goods is always agreement to sell. It is never actual sale because a person cannot transfer who is not able to sell. Yeah, bro, that is right. इसके पास जो है ही नहीं तो देगा कैसे. Contingent good. The acquisition of good which depends on a certain contingency. Uncertain. The acquisition good which depends upon uncertain contingency. Are called contingent good. Contingent good are also operate as an agreement to sell and not a sale. So far as the question of passing on properties to the buyer is concerned, in other words, like the future goods. In the case of contingent goods, also the property does not pass to the buyer. इतना अच्छा मेरा सेटअप था. इसका ये भी तो है चुका. Continue the acquisition of which depends upon a certain contingency and a certain event or contingent good. Contingent good also operates an agreement to sell and not sale. Contingent good मतलब agreement to sell होता है ना कि sale होता है ठीक है. As the question of passing of properties to the buyer is concerned, in other words, like the future good, in the case of contingent good, also the property does not pass to the buyer at the time of the making of the contract. Contingent good भी वो pass नहीं करता buyer को at a time. Contingent good also operates as an delivery of deliveries, forms and derivatives. Derivatives. Delivery means voluntary transfer of possession from one person to another. Section 222 as the rules. Delivery of goods may be made by doing anything which has the effect of the putting the goods in the possession of the buyer of any person authorized to hold them on his behalf. Forms of delivery. Following are the kinds of delivery from transfer of possession. Voluntary transfer of possession from one person to another. Actual delivery considered as symbolic delivery. Actual delivery. When the goods are physically delivered to the buyer, actual delivery take place when the seller transfer the physical good possession of goods to the buyer or the third party person authorized to hold person on behalf of the buyer. मैं किस चीज़ की तैयारी कर रहा हूँ? Are you preparing for what? Are you preparing for what, bro? For what? I am preparing for CA. Delivery test forms and derivatives. Delivering voluntary transfer position for one person to another. Section 222 as a general rules, delivery goods may be made by doing anything which has the effect of putting the goods in the possession to the of the buyer or any person authorized to hold them on his behalf. Forms of delivery. Following are the kinds of delivery or for transfer possession. Actual delivery, constructed delivery, symbolic delivery. Actual delivery. When the goods are physically delivered to the buyer, actual delivery takes place when the seller transfers the physical possession of goods to the buyer to a third person authorized to hold goods on behalf of the buyer. This is the most common method of delivery. Constructive delivery. Transfer of goods is effective without any change in the custody of actual possession of the things, as in case of delivery by the adornment acknowledgement. Constructed delivery takes place when When a person in possession of the goods belongs to the seller, acknowledge to the buyer that he holds the goods on buyer's behalf. मतलब कंस्ट्रक्टिव में क्या होता है, बोलता है कि मैं तुम्हारे बदले में गुड्स रख रहा हूँ, मतलब बायर के बिहाफ में गुड्स रख रहा हूँ. Similarly, when there is a delivery of things in a token of transfer, something else, that is delivery of goods in a course of transaction may be made by handing over the document of title like bills of lading, railway receipts of delivery or delivery order, or the key of warehouse certain the goods in hands over to buyer where actually is not possible. Here may be delivery of these means getting of the goods. Goods are said to be deliverable in conditions. Delivery are said when they are in such a condition that the buyer would understand. I had stomach. Document of title. Document of title includes prints of lading, dog, warehouse, keeper certificate, warehouse certificate, railway receipts, multimodal transport document, warrant or order, or the delivery of goods, any other document used in the ordinary course of business as a proof of possessions of controls of goods or is for authorizing or purporting to authorize either by endorsement or by delivery. The possessor of the document to transfer or receive goods thereby represented in section 2 is only a list or no, only list it is not exhaustive. Any other document which has the above characteristics all fall under the same category through bills of lading is a document of title made except made receipt is not it is regarded as a law merely an acknowledgement of the receipts of the goods. Document amount of amount of the document of title only where it is shown and conditional undertaking to deliver the goods to the holder of the document. However, these are difference between document title, document are showing title and document of title. As a shared certificate is a document showing title but not a document to title. Document to title may show that the person named in the share certificate is entitled to share the share represented by it, but it is not allow the person to transfer the share mentioned therein by the mere endorsements on the back of the certificates and the delivery of the certificate. Mercantile agent. Mercantile agent, it means an agent who in the customary course of business has as such agent authority either to sell the goods or to consign goods for the purpose of sales or to buy the goods or to raise money on the security of goods. Mercantile agent can borrow money by pledging the goods. Pledging मतलब goods को गिरवी रख के वो पैसे उठा सकता है. Property section 211. The property means here ownership or general property. In the every contract of sale, the ownership of good must be transferred by the seller to the buyer, or there should be an agreement by the seller to transfer the ownership of the buyer. It means general property and not merely a special property. The property in goods means the general property, that is all ownership rights of goods. Notes that the general property in goods it is to be distinguished from a special property. It is quite possible that the general property in things may in one person's and a special property in the same things may be another. Example: when an article is pledged, the special property can get transferred and not the general property. In the general property in the क्या है भाई ये प्रॉपर्टी तो सेक्शन होना ही नहीं चाहिए था. क्या लिखा है? Type of mortal गिरवी पड़ा हुआ है. Property means here means ownership or general property in the every contract of sale. The ownership good must be transferred by the seller to the buyer. On there should be an agreement by the seller to transfer of the ownership Distinguished from a special property, it is quite possible that a general property in things may be in one person and a special property in same things maybe in another. Example: when an article is placed, the self or special property get transferred and not. Special property in the same things may be in another. Example: when an article is placed, the special property get transferred and not the general property. General property in a things may be transferred subject to the special property continuing to be remained with another person, that is the pledge, who has the right to transfer, who has right to retain the goods pledged till payments of stipulated dues. Insolvents: a person is said to be insolvent when he ceases to be pay his debts in ordinary course of business, or cannot pay his debts, or they become due by the whether it has been. Insolvent section. A person is said to be insolvent when he ceases to pay his debts in ordinary course of business, or cannot pay his debts as they become due, whether he has committed any act or of insolvency or not. Price means the money consideration for the for of sales of goods. It is the value of goods expressed in monetary term. It is essential requirements to make a contract of sales of goods. Quality of goods. Quality includes their states or conditions. Section 211. Sales and agreement to sell. Section 4. Again, according to section 4.1, a contract of sale is a goods in a contract whereby the seller transfer agrees to transfer the property and goods to the buyer for a price. There may be a contract of sale between one part owner and another. A contract of sale may be absolute or conditional. Where under a contract of sale, the property and goods is transferred from the seller to the buyer. The contract is called a sale, but where the transfer of property and goods is there will take place at a future time or subjects to some condition thereafter to be fulfilled. It is called agreement to sell. An agreement to sell becomes sale when the time elapses or the conditions are fulfilled subject to the which the property and good is transferred. Contract of sale. Agreement to sell. Sale the property in good is transferred from the seller to the buyer immediately. The term sale is defined in section 4.3 of the Sales of Good Act 1990, where under a contract of sale of the sale in the sale the property in the good is transferred from the seller to the buyer. The contract is called sale. Agreement to sell. In an agreement to sell, the ownership of the good is not transferred immediately. It is intending to transfer at a future date upon the completion of the certain conditions there on the term is defined section 4.3 of the Sales of Good Act 1930 as where the transfer of property and goods take place at a future time or to the some condition thereafter be fulfilled. It is called an agreement to sell. It is called an agreement to sell. Thus, whether a contract of sale of goods is absolute sales or an agreement to sell depends on the fact whether it is contemplates immediates transfer from the seller to the buyer or transfer to the take place at a future date. Agreement to sell. An agreement to sell the ownership of the good is not transferring immediately. It is intending to transfer at a future date upon completion of the certain conditions thereon. The term is defined in section 4.3 of the Sales of Good Act 1930 as where the transfer of property in the goods is take place at a future day, future time, or subject to the some condition thereafter be fulfilled. It is called an agreement to sell. Thus, whether a contract of sale of goods is absolute sales or agreement to sell depends on the fact whether it is complete contemplates immediate transfer from the seller to the buyer or transfer take place at a future date. Agrees to buy the October that he will sell his car or buy on 10th of November 2022 for the sum of 7 lakh. Is an agreement to sell. When the agreement to sell becomes sale, an agreement to sell becomes sale when the time elapsed or condition are fulfilled subject to the which the property in the goods is to be transferred. The following are the essential following elements must coexist as to the constitute a contract of sale under the state of Code 1930. two parties, the seller and the buyer, and the two must be different person, and person cannot be person cannot put the cannot be the cannot be both the seller and the buyer, and the sells goods to himself. The subject matter of the contract must be necessarily be goods covering only movable property purchased by the seller or future goods. A price in money should be paid or promised, but there is nothing to prevent the consideration from being partly in money and partly in kind. Partly, the transfer of property and goods from seller to the buyer must take place. The contract of sale is made by an offer to buy or sell goods for a price by one party and acceptance of such other by other offer by other. A contract of sale may be absolute or conditional. All essential elements of a valid contract must be present in a contract of sale. Example: free consent of the party, competency of the party, legality of subject objects and consideration, etc. Distinction between sale and agreement to sell. Basis of difference: sales, agreement to sell, transfer of property. The property and goods passes to the buyer immediately. Property and goods passes to the buyer on future dates on fulfillment of certain conditions. Some conditions. It is executed contract, that is a contract for which consideration has been paid. It is executory contract, that is contract which consideration is to be paid at a future date. Every party can sue the damage for only and not for the price unless the price was payable at a stated date. The seller can sue the buyer for the price of the goods. Right now, liability of party. Subsequent loss or destructions of the good is liability of the buyer. Such loss or destruction is the liability of the seller. Risk of loss is that of seller. It is just in rem, it is just in personam. Create just in rem means right against the whole world. Sale. मतलब right restrictions trying related against the whole world. Right. Create right in personam means right against the particular party to the contract. Agreement to sell है ना भाई, agreement हुआ नहीं है तो आप कैसे उसको पहले सीव कर दोगे? आपने उसको बोला है बेचने के लिए, आप बेचे थोड़ी ना है। अब बेच भी नहीं किया तो अभी कैसे आप उसको बोल दीजिएगा कि मिल गया कोर्ट में? अभी एग्रीमेंट टू सेल का एक डेट होता है, उस डेट के बाद ही ना आप उसको बोल सकते हैं कि आपने अपना पार्ट परफॉर्म नहीं किया है. Sale distinguishes from other similar contract. Sale and hire purchase. Contract of sale resembles with contract of hire purchase very closely, and indeed the real object of contract of hire purchase is sale of goods. Ultimately, hire purchase agreement are governed by Hire Purchase Act 1972. The hire purchase agreement means an agreement under which the goods are let on hire and under which the hire has an option to purchase them in accordance with the terms of the agreement and include an agreement under which possession of goods is delivered to the owner thereof. The person on conditions thus that such persons pays the that such person pays the option or of purchase and time in accordance with the term of the agreement includes an agreement under which possession of goods is delivered by the owner thereof to a person on condition that such person pays the agreed amount in periodical installments and the property in good start up goods is passes to the such person on the payment of the last of such installment, and such person has right to terminate the agreement at any time before the property so passes. Nonetheless, a sale has to be distinguished from hire purchase, and their legal incidents are quite different. The main points of distinction between sale and hire purchase are as follows: basis of different times of passing property. Mhm. Sales property in goods is transferred to the buyer immediately at the time of the contract. Hire purchase the property in good is passed to the hire upon payment of last installment. मतलब लास्ट इंस्टॉलमेंट पे ही आपको मिलेगा आपका गुड गुड आपके नाम होगा लेकिन वो रहेगा आपके पास पोजेशन रहेगा लेकिन प्रॉपर्टी रजिस्टर्ड नहीं रहेगी पोजीशन ऑफ द गुड्स पोजीशन ऑफ द पार्टी द पोजीशन ऑफ द पार्टी इज द ओनर पोजीशन ऑफ द हायर is the bailey till he pays the last installment. Last installment payment के बाद ही आप ओनर बनेंगे, उससे पहले आप बेली रहेंगे. Like buyer cannot terminate the contract and is bound to pay the price of the goods. If he so likes terminate the contract by returning the goods to its owner without any liability to pay the remaining installment. मतलब देख उसको नहीं चाहिए गुड्स तो वापस कर दे गुड्स, उसको आगे पे करने की कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है. वो तो वहीं से उसका खत्म हो जाएगा बकाया खाता, खाया बकाया चल रहा था सब पता बंद हो जाएगा. He doesn't need to pay more than he taken. मतलब अब उसका मन नहीं है, इतने दिन उसने चलाया, इतने दिन की इंस्टॉलमेंट उसने भर दी है, अब ज़्यादा ज़रूरी नहीं है ना कि मतलब अब जो नहीं है वो कैसे पे करेगा. Burden of risk of insolvency of the seller. The seller takes the risk of any loss resulting from the insolvency of the buyer. The owner takes no such risk for its hire fails to pay an installment. The owner has the right to take back the goods. The buyer can pass a goods titles to a bona fide purchaser from him. Hire cannot pass a titles even to a bona fide purchaser until he pays the last. Buyer in sale can resell the goods. The hire purchaser cannot unless hire purchaser cannot resell unless he has paid all the installments. Sale and bailment. Bailment is delivery of goods for some specific purpose under a contract on the condition that the same goods are to be returned when the purpose is accomplished to the bailier or are to be disposed of according to the directions of bailey. Provisions related to the bailment are regulated by the Indian Contract Act 1872. Difference between bailment and sale may be clearly understood by studying the following. Basis of different sales. The property in goods is transferred from the seller to the buyer, so it is transferred general property. There is only transfer of possession of goods from the bailier to the bailey for any of the reasons like safe custody, carriage, etc. So it is transfer of special property. The bailey must return the goods to the bailier on the accomplishment of the purpose for which the bailment was made. The consideration is the price in terms of money. The consideration may be gratuitous and non-gratuitous. Bailment क्या होता है? There is only transfer of possession of goods from the bailier to the bailey of any of the reasons like safe custody, marriage, carriage, etc. So it is transfer of special property. The return of the goods is contract and contract of sale is not possible. The bailey must return the goods to the bailier on the accomplishment of the purpose for which the bailment was made. The consideration in price is price of terms of money. The consideration may be gratuitous, non-gratuitous, sale, and the contract for which for contract sale and contract for work and labor. A contract of sale is a one in which some goods are sold or are to be sold for a price, but where no goods are sold and there is only the doing or renting the some work of labor, then the contract is only of work and labor and not of sale of goods. Where the goods is supplies to be goldsmiths for preparing the ornaments, or when an artist does to paint a picture, but where no goods are sold and there is only a doing rendering some work of labor, then the contract is only work and labor and not a sale of good. Contract of sale, how made? Section 5. According to Section 5.1 of the contract of sale may be made by in any of the modes. Contract of sale made by offer to buy or sell goods for a price and acceptance of such offer. There may be immediate delivery of goods to the property. हे भगवान क्या हो रहा है? परीक्षा ले रहे हो क्या? दे दो लाइट ही कट गई यार. Bailment is only transfer of possession of goods from the bailier to the bailiff for any of the reasons like say custody, carriage, etc. So it is transfer of special property. The bailiff must return, but in water have I. The bailiff must return the goods to the bailier on the accomplishment of the purpose for which the bailment was made. The consideration may be gratuitous or non-gratuitous. Sale and contract for work and labor. A contract of sale of goods in which one in which some goods are sold or are to be sold for a price, but where no goods are sold and there is only the doing or rendering of some work of labor, then the contract is only the work and labor and not of sale of goods. Contract of sale how made section 5 according to section 5 and a contract of sale may be made by in any of the following modes. A contract of sale may be according to 5 and a contract of sale may be made by in the following modes. A contract of sale may be made by offer to buy or sell goods for a price and acceptance of such offer. There may be delivery of goods or there may be immediate payment of price, but it may be agreed that the delivery is to be made at some future dates, or there may be immediate delivery of goods and immediate payment of price, or it may be agreed that the delivery or payment or both are to be made at installments, or it may be agreed that the delivery or payment of both are to be made at some future dates. Subject matter of contract of sale. Existing of future goods. Section 6. The goods which forms the subject matter of a contract of sale may be either existing goods that are acquired, owned, or possessed by the seller, or future goods. There may be contract for sale of goods, the acquisition of which by the seller depends upon a contingency which may or may not happen.